Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat Parashat class, Parashat Vayese, and he met her at the well. This seems to be a recurring theme in our Torah, where in this week's parasha, we have the meeting of Yaakov and his future wife, one of his future wives, Rachel, which occurs at a well. Okay. This doesn't seem unusual if we are educated parasha studiers. And the reason is because it's happened before and it will happen again. As we know, in Parashat Vayese 2 weeks ago, it was not Yitzhak himself, but it was Eliezer as the emissary of Abraham Avinu, and standing in for Yitzhak, his son, both who are the master of Eliezer, we're assuming it was Eliezer, was the one who went out to seek a mate for Yitzhak. And we know that he parked himself at the Be'er. He had camels with him, and he parked himself at the Be'er and at the Ma'ayan, by the stream and by the well. And there he found Rivka and the entire scene of the camels and her wonderful acts of motivation and chesed at that well. Over here, again, Yaakov Avinu meets Rachel at the well. And in the future, we will see in the book of Shemot, in Parasha of Shemot, Moshe Rabbeinu himself, as he's fleeing Paro, it says that he left Egypt and he went to Haran, Vayabo el Habe'er, Vayabo el Mitzrayim, Vayashev al Habe'er, and he dwelled and he sat by the Be'er. Hold on 1 second.
No, I can't. I'm going to the city.
Yeah, but
so we're back. So question is, this cannot be a coincidence. Seems astounding that we're seeing this scene over and over again. And our forefathers, Yitzhak, indirectly, Yaakov, very directly, Moshe Rabbeinu, finding his wife Sipporah at the Be'er, seems not to be an accident. Now, it is true that in the case of Eliezer finding Rivka, that he did have camels. They were concluding a very long journey and they had to drink water. It is true that Yaakov, seemingly, as he neared the city, this was the first thing that he saw in terms of people, and he needed to find his way and ask directions and ask a question. That is true. We do not know the case regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, but what we do know is that it'll happen in common. And let's try to understand for a moment why it is that this happened. Now, beyond the so to speak commonality of finding their spouses at the Be'er, we also see that, at least in the case this week with Rachel, and with the case in Shemot regarding Sipporah, that they indeed were shepherdesses, right? They were female shepherds. And so that was almost like a sought after trait, right? Today we have a shidduch resume, and we have all the attributes of the wonderful girl on it. And she went to this yeshiva and this seminary, right? Apparently, 3,700 years ago, and she's a shepherdess. Don't forget about that. This seemingly was it couldn't have been that all women had a job as a shepherd, right? This was certainly the case with the wives sought after from the great patriarchs of our past. And I will tell you something a little more. And that is that, we know there's no coincidence. We believe that. But it seems not only to be where they happened to chance upon the Be'er, but if you look at the Lashon carefully in this week's parasha and regarding Moshe Rabbeinu, it seems like they actually sought that well. In this parasha, Perek Kaftet, right in the beginning, Pasuk Bet, it says that, or Pasuk Aleph, Vayisa Yaakov Raglav, Vayelech Arsa ben Echedim, he went towards the east, he bade his father, Yitzhak, and he went towards Haran. Pasuk Bet says, Vayar, V'hineh be'er basadeh. So the Torah tells us he saw. Often the word Vayar means more than just saw, but he understood. And behold, there was a be'er basadeh, v'hineh sham shelosha adreson. And there was 3 flocks of sheep, robesim aleha, settling around it. This was a central be'er where the flocks of sheep would quench their thirst, would be fed periodically. And the stone was large. The covering of the be'er was a large stone. And you see from the Lashon of the Pasuk that Yaakov Abinu made a point. Vayad, he looked around. He was looking for some point of communication. He was looking for some landing point, right? We don't know how long his journey was and what he embarked on the way. But here, as soon as he saw Be'er Basadeh, Yaakov Abinu made a beeline towards that Be'er. The same thing goes with Moshe Rabbeinu in Parashat Shemot. In the same Pasuk, by the way, as an aside, that the Pasuk in Shemot actually encapsulates, could be 50, 60 years of Moshe Rabbeinu's life in a single Pasuk. But in that Pasuk, it says that he fled from Paro. He left Mitzrayim. He was a fugitive, of course, because he feared for his life. And it says, I have the Pasuk for you here. Moshe was being fled, chased after. He fled from Paro. He went to dwell in the land of Minyan. What does that mean? He didn't live by the Be'er. He settled himself on the Be'er. Seems like it's very purposeful that he sought out. Let's see here. Is a country, it seems like it's safe over here to settle. I'm camouflaged. I'll be able to be inconspicuous. And where's that Be'er anyway? It does seem to be a focal point, as you have years of Moshe Rabbeinu's life flashing before our eyes in one pasuk. But the pasuk made sure to say Vayeshev al Be'er. Seems very purposeful. So there's an intent to find the Be'er on the behalf of our great leaders. And finally, I'll mention another commonality, again between Vayese and Shemot, that there was a bit of bravery and heroism and righteousness that we see here with Yaakov Abinu. He ended up mightily removing that stone that it took the many shepherds who gathered around together to do it, and he ended up doing it on his own. And afterwards, he rebuked them for wasting seemingly their employer's time until they had to explain to him why they gathered here, because they needed a joint effort to remove the stone. But you see that Yaakov also used the bear as a platform to express Hesed, as he did by lifting the stone for Rachel single-handedly, right? Lehavdil, showing off for his girlfriend, right? It's much more than that, obviously, but also there at the Be'er, guiding people and making sure that they were acting properly. And you see later, of course, with Moshe Rabbeinu, it says that the shepherds were bullying the 7 daughters of Zipporah. And it says that Vayichareshu, Moshe Rabbeinu was able to single-handedly win them over, or push them physically away. Vayoshi'an, and he saved the daughters. Again, that Be'er was a scene of bravery, of righteousness, of justice. So there's a lot going on over here in these Be'erot scenes. So let's try to offer a number of explanations for why the meetings of our great future leaders, Yitzhak, not only the meetings, but the unions and the marriages of Yitzhak, Yaakov, and Moshe Rabbeinu all took place at the Be'er. So the first is the practical. And the practical is that, the be'er, especially if it was a productive well, if it was a well was a fresh water well, it was large enough, in the days pre-plumbing, was one of the most critical aspects to a city, whether it be in a city. Some people lucky enough to have private wells, but sometimes in the outskirts of a city for travelers, this was a place that you could definitely find people gathering and gravitating towards. So that on a practical level, in all these situations, if they were looking for someone, of course, Eliezer was looking for a mate. Yaakov was looking for someone for the family of his mother, which was his mission, just charged by both parents. And Moshe Rabbeinu, we're not sure what he was looking for, right? But they were looking for something. They went to a place that was populated. All right, that's a very practical reason. But there's something else, and that is that, again, can't overlook the fact that both Rachel and Zipporah were shepherdesses. And also that these places became a platform for them demonstrating their good traits, as especially was accentuated by Rivka Imenu, where Rivka, with her, with alacrity, going back and forth, almost in an obsessed manner, feeding those camels after she tended to Eliezer, had a platform to demonstrate that, so that if these great men were looking for righteous woman, proper woman that will be, especially in the case of Rivka and Rachel, two of our imahot, the matriarchs, and breeding basically the future descendants of our nation, well, they had to be women of certain traits, righteousness. Let's go to a place that it's possible not just to find a person, but to give them the potential, the platform to demonstrate their traits, their righteousness. Let them be able to show who they are. And it was the case, certainly with Rivka. Eliezer went, he made his deal with God, in fact. His deal of, if I find this person who can, exhibit chesed, then she's the one. The well would be the perfect spot for that. Right? Yaakov, we don't see specifically what Rachel did, but she was shepherding for her father, it says. She was, therefore doing something that perhaps wasn't so common for a woman to do. And it says that she was doing this on behalf of her father. And that also is something that Yaakov Avinu was able to see and be impressed by. So in the case of Zipporah as well. And so therefore these men went to an area that was not only more likely to find the people, but and the people that they might have been looking for outside a certain city, but also possibly, if they indeed were looking for a mate, where we can maybe see someone without having a resume or knowing background or being able to do due diligence, I can see from my own eyes what the person is made of, the fabric of the person, because of the environment. And the Be'er, therefore, was that type of environment that people congregated, and there was a lot of exchange and interaction over there. That would be a place that I could possibly see someone at their best, or lack thereof. Another practical reason. Let's find something beyond the practical. Now, in all three cases, Eliezer was acting on behalf of prophets, namely Abraham and Yitzhak. Yaakov Avinu was a prophet, as he just communicated a few Pesukim prior to the scene with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the famous dream of the ladder and Hashem's communication to him. And of course, Moshe Rabbeinu was not so far away from the scene of the Sinai. So they were all prophets. And therefore, beyond the practical, we can assume that the great patriarchs and leaders and prophets of our past had some type of plan and vision and insightfulness beyond the practical to find their mates at the Be'er. And indeed, we see some astounding depth and symbolism behind the be'er, especially vis-a-vis a possible wife or a good woman. The Kli Akkad points out, first of all, in our parasha, where Yaakov came to the Be'er, and there was Shlosha Edreson Robesim Aleha. Again, there was 3 flocks of sheep where the sheep were grazing and perhaps resting by the Be'er. He says, well, that's very symbolic of the 3 great men who happened to, quote unquote, find their mates at the Be'er, Yitzhak, Yaakov, and Moshe Rabbeinu. Perhaps that 3 is symbolic of that. But beyond that, we have a pasuk in Mishleh, written by Shlomo HaMelech, which is all about analogy. And the mashal goes as follows in Perek He pasuk Tet Vav in Mishleh: Shetem mayim miborecha v'nozelim mitoch be'erecha. Drink water from your well, and flowing waters also refers to your board, is your pit, synonymous with be'er. The second word is explicitly be'er, from your well. Drink from your be'er. What does that mean? What is that analogy coming to teach us? What is the lesson behind the scenes? So there, both the Mesudat David and the Ibn Ezra both say that the be'er is likened to the woman, and there it's saying, stick to your wife. Miborecha. From your, right, the be'er is the source of water. Your wife is a source, going to be a future source of life, right? Drink from a single be'er. Be faithful. Don't look elsewhere. Stick to that woman, right? As if to say, in a symbolic way, that these prophets were also plugging themselves into the depth of meaning behind what the be'er is in this olam, and that is, I want to find a woman that in the future will be one of faithfulness, and that I can count on her, and I can commit myself right now to be counted upon myself. Very interesting. Beyond that, the Kli Akkad is something astounding, and I hadn't thought of this before I read this Kli Akkad, and that is that these, both in the case of Yaakov and Moshe, there was this huge covering, this stone, and they both, with great might and bravery and strength, were able to remove single-handedly those stones. But there was a seal on this be'er as was presented to them. And he says that this is likened to a modest woman, a proper woman. A woman, not just because she's covered, because she's, so to speak, sealed. It means that she only gives herself and reveals herself in a very limited, periodic way. Of course, practically speaking, she has to have children, has to be with her husband once in a while. The stone is mainly covered. The be'er is mainly covered up, right? She, very, very seldomly allows for the be'er to open, to give herself to a man, to be with a man. It's something that is only done very indiscreetly, right? And very modestly, and therefore that is symbolic of a proper woman. And therefore, said a prophet, Kadosh Baruch Hu, very likely, therefore, if I have that type of intent and kavanah to find such a woman, to actually create that scene by a place that stands for such ideals. And therefore, another possible reason why to find the bed. But finally, on a much broader way, and specifically in our parasha, there is deep symbolism regarding not just the be'er, the idea of the three flocks and the stone on top of the be'er. The Midrash in Bereshit Rabbah speaks of this scene, and he speaks specifically about the be'er and says that there was Shloshla Azreson, the 3 flocks. This symbolizes Moshe, Aharon, and Miriam. And min ha-be'er ha-hi yeshku ha-adarim. And from this be'er, says the Torah in our parasha, it quenches, it feeds the flocks. And from that be'er, Moshe, Aharon, and Miriam all had a gift that in their merit was offered to Am Yisrael. And from that be'er, from them, and from their zechut, what does that mean? Yeshku ha'adarim, the flocks were fed. Says the Midrash that everyone would Moshech Mayim, would draw water for his tribe and for his family, based on their merits. So the 3 flocks and the drawing from that well is our future protectors in our generation and our decades in the desert. Moshe, Haron, and Miriam. Further, says that very same Midrash Rabbah, that the Shlosha Adreson, the 3 flocks, symbolize the 3 regalim. And from that Be'er, Yeshku Ha'adarim, it means from that Be'er, Shu'avim would draw Ruach HaKodesh, the great people of our past, draw divine spirit and prophecy as we came to the Shalosh Regalim and congregated around the Bet HaMikdash. Further, and it also brings up the Nesuch HaMayim actually. Furthermore, Rabbeinu Bachye also picking up on this vibe, so to speak, of symbolism, speaks of the Shlosha Adreson, again, the 3 flocks by the Be'er, as the Remez is a hint of the Bet HaMikdash, and the 3 Batei Mikdash, the 3rd one being the one of our future, soon in our days, B'ezrat Hashem. Replete, and the 3 flocks, maybe Kohen, Levi, Yisrael, replete with symbolism, is this Be'er, and the specific scene in our parasha was Yaakov Abinu, so that Yitzhak, Yaakov, and Moshe Rabbeinu sought to not just find a mate for themselves, but to situate and plant and establish themselves as the leaders and the future, spring and wells of our people, of our nation, and plug themselves into a place of powerful symbolism in order to start that venture, in order to begin that. And as we said in last week's parasha, and 2 weeks ago's parasha rather, and Rabbeinu last week's parasha, and Rabbeinu Bachya mentioned this. If we remember the scene of Yitzhak Avinu redigging the wells that were dug by his father Abraham Avinu, and that those wells, and finally he found a Be'er Mayim Hayim, living water, standing for Torah. Those wells have other deep symbolism, and Abraham and Yitzhak always projected their teachings from altars and from wells for that reason. And so this is more than just a rendezvous and a place of socializing and finding future mates. But from our parasha and 2 parashiot ago, in Vayese with Rivka, and the future parasha in Shemot with Moshe Rabbeinu, these great men found their future wives at places that were not just practical to find them, but places that symbolized what a great woman should be and could be, and what symbolized the future holiness and sanctity of our nation. That place, that Be'er, is exactly where I want to settle, said our great leaders, and find our future wives and establish future generations of Am Yisrael. Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen v'Amen. Shabbat Shalom.